Why didn't Brazil become a global superpower despite its size and resources? Very high levels of corruption. Lots of extremely poor and uneducated low education persons. Huge income disparities. Lots of social problems. Still, a beautiful country filled with wonderful people. I love Brazil. You have to be there to feel the passion for the country. Corruption on every level of the government. Seriously, you have no idea. Every public service is plagued with corruption. They keep the majority poor and uneducated while the middle class keep fighting each other to choose between left and right, which in the end will be as corrupt as it was before. Brazil is among the highest tax collectors of the world, and the public service is just awful because the money is split into the pockets of many corrupts in the chain until a drop of it gets where it should. As you compared to the USA. In my opinion, Brazil is the poor cousin of USA. We copy so many of the bad stuff from the US. There's plenty of countries with vast natural resources. North Korea and Afghanistan both have trillions of dollars in minerals, for instance. Extracting those resources and turning it into something usable or sellable is a whole other issue. Brazil is well on its way to becoming one if they can avoid falling into an authoritarian dictatorship. It's never just one reason, but a lot of times it's to do with geography. How many major deep water ports does it have? What's the local farm land like? Do they have to import lots of fertilizer? When did they find oil and what type? Typically, you need cheap transportation to have excess enough to save and trade. For instance, North America's rivers are widely plentiful, reliable, tame, and run the correct direction for global trade. Brazil is what the United States would have looked like if the South had couped the federal government instead of splitting off into the Civil War. As an economic history student, here's my 2 cents. People like to talk about corruption, but often forget to consider its roots. The short answer is exploitation colonialism. This economic foundation has left lasting impacts on all aspects of the country, notably the legacy of slavery. Brazil abolished slavery only in 1888, patrimonialism governance which underlies the corruption mentioned, and the formation of a commodities-based elite with no interest in building industry or developing the country, caring only about extracting resources. For more in-depth explanations, I recommend the books The Colonial Background of Modern Brazil, The Economic Growth of Brazil, and the recently awarded Nobel Prize winner Why Nations Fail, which also explores this subject. Corruption. It is always corruption. Africa is the most resource-rich continent. Countries there should be doing very well, but everyone else exploits it. Their government took the wheel and drove into a tree. Over and over and over again. Metaphors aside, the answer is simply corruption and turmoil. Large subeducated population that is easily manipulated by the elite. The elite give zero fucks about the country being a superpowers. They just want to fill their own pockets. So it's all by design. My friend, let me tell you about the USA and its tendency to destabilize other nations. 1964 Brazilian coup d'etat. Because in Brazil you have Brazilians ruling. Consider that Portugal is the poorest country in Western Europe. Brazil simply inherited a culture that is too chill for its own good among its elite. Endemic corruption, and also keeping slavery until the goddamn 1880s sure didn't help. Corruption, poor education, expensive cost of living, being one of the US's bitch for at least 30 years as a dictatorship. At least overall, Brazil is not trying enough to become a global superpower. We're more or less trying to crawl out of the hole we dug ourselves in first just to then try to become a superpower. Stupid fucking leaders elected by a stupid fucking population, making sure they maintain one of the most unequal systems on earth so that people stay stupid and keep voting for them. Also, United States big stick policy in full effect here, complete with military coups and Red Scare. I can talk as much shit as I want about this place because I live here. The US helped fund a coup in the 60s that installed a dictator. Fascists usually aren't good for a country's growth.